So where you want to start?
Well, I want to start by getting a little background on you, where you grew up and kind of what life was like when you were a kid.
Well, I was born in England, and I came here in 1945. My mom brought me here, and the reason that happened was my mom was an American citizen. She worked for the U.S. Embassy in London. My dad was a Eastern European. He was Prussian, which Prussia no longer existed since World War One. So he was a Prussian, but it was where he lived was in part of Poland, and that was confiscated by the Nazis in September 1st of 1939. But he had escaped. He was a doctor, and his family were doctors. And his dad had sent him in the early 30s after he went to medical school. He went to school in Berlin. His dad sent him, saw that they were Jewish, and his dad saw the tide coming. And so he sent my dad to England and for medical school. And then when the war actually erupted in 39, my dad never went back home. And by then he had already married my mom. And so when the war ended in Europe, VE Day, Victory Europe, when it ended, my dad, who was in the RAF, he was a flight surgeon, and then he became a squadron commander because of the attrition rate of pilots. They were losing them. And so when the war ended in Europe, the RAF sent him to Oakland, California. So my mom and I got on a boat. We came here. I went through Ellis Island. And then we went to California to Hunters Point, which is San Francisco. My dad was involved in the Lend-Lease program from the British side of medical supplies and medical stuff for the RAF getting ready for the push into Japan. As we know, that after Japan, VJ Day, after the Japanese threw up the flag, my dad had to go back to England to get discharged. So before he went, it was probably the only time I ever heard my mom and dad argue. There was a really good argument, and it was on where we were going to live. My dad wanted to go back to specifically Europe, but he would settle for England. And my mom, who was originally from East Texas and college in East Texas, Women's College, she wanted to stay in the States. So the compromise was he'd go back to Europe, try to find his family, and then he'd come back and we'd settle in the States. So he went back. His village was in occupied territories of the Russian bloc. He couldn't get in there. He did find out that his village was totally eliminated. They were all Jews. It was a Jewish little village. And they were all marched to a place called Treblinka, which, if you look up history, Treblinka was it was a death camp. And I believe the number of people that ever escaped Treblinka in its entirety was less than 100. So anyway, my dad came back to the States, and he had to get a medical license to practice here in America. And we went to New York City, and the reason is New York had one of the two toughest states for medical license. And fair to my father, though I wouldn't admit it as a kid, my father was very, very intelligent. unbelievably smart guy. Gruff, old Eastern European, gruff guy. You weren't going to get a conversation with him unless it was needed. And he was a taskmaster. But so we went there to New York. While in New York, I got polio. And I spent almost 3.5 years, almost 4 years in the Children's Hospital. I spent 15 months in an iron lung. And for all the bad it was really good because my dad and I sort of bonded then. He would come at night and sit down next to me and read the classics for a couple hours. And to this day, I'm a prolific reader. I owe him for that. And I love the classics. So he was, that was our bonding time. When I finally got out of the hospital, I was learning how to walk. I had braces and all that, and I was learning how to walk. They sent me away to private school in England. I went to school in Wales, in Pembroke, the town of Pembroke, Wales, to a private school. It was predominantly was co-ed. We had about 200 boys, about 100 girls. And it was predominantly non-British. Non-British. It was wealthy or upper class kids whose parents farmed them out. And an example is my roommate for most of my time there. And this was from about 6th grade till 11th. You get your certificate, not a diploma, certificate 11th grade in England. And so my roommate, his father was the pilot. He was a lieutenant colonel, was the pilot for a guy named Batista who ran Cuba. Castro is the one that overthrew Batista. And he was my roommate for my time there. And I loved it. It was a self-supporting school, meaning we raised our own crops. We had a dairy, which is where I went. I love animals, and I went to the dairy, and I ended up my last year actually running the dairy under the supervision of a herdsmaster, but I ran it, and I loved it. I loved the work. So we get up early in the morning, go milk the cows, take care of everything, come back, shower, and then we go to class. And then as soon as class is over, I'd go back, change, and then back to farming. And it was great for me. And I didn't mind being away from, quote, home. My parents, they had their life, and that was a very social type of life. We lived in Northwest Connecticut on 160 acres. And it was, they entertained a lot. Children are to be seen, not heard. And so that was that. So when I graduated and got my certificate, I came back to the States, and we had a big disagreement. My mom wanted me to be a dentist or a doctor, and that's not me. I wanted to be a veterinarian. So the compromise was, okay, you go to Cornell, which was not that far away, up in the Albany area, not that far away. And I didn't want to go there. I want to go to Texas A&M, large animal, cattle. That's really from dairy cattle to beef cattle. I wanted to be a vet in beef cattle. So luckily, and I mean this as my uncle and an aunt, they conspired, got me the paperwork, and I submitted, and I went to A&M. caused a lot of friction with my mom and dad about it. But, they said, okay, you'll go. And once you get your BS degree, then you can transfer, go ahead and we'll get you. I was never going to be a doctor. Wasn't going to be a dentist. I knew what I wanted. In between, my folks were very well off. My dad did very well as a doctor, very well. And so one of the things that transpired was I was an only child. I was spoiled, rich kid, and I had a car. I had when I was in college, I had an XK120 Jaguar, 1951. And I came home between my third and fourth year at A&M. And for the summer, though I never spent the summer there, I checked in, so to speak. And I went there, and I told my parents, I got to take the car down to have it serviced. And my dad said, yeah, get it serviced. So I took the car down, and at the car dealership was a brand new Jag XK140 in the showroom. Even though it was red, it was beautiful. And so that night at dinner, we ate every night at dinner with a suit coat, a tie, and a shirt on. Every night. That was old school Eastern European family. And that was, my mom was to my right, my dad was there, and I was here. And that's how we ate. And there was very little conversation. And that night, he asked me how's the car, and I, what needs to be done. I said nothing. It's in great shape. I said, but I'd like. There's a new car there, a new Jag, and I want that. I want that. And he looked at me. He said, "Oh, wait a minute. What's wrong with your car?" And I said, "Nothing." And he said, that's the end of this discussion. So I was miffed, to say the least. And so I said, okay, we're good. Okay. So the next day, we had a summer cottage up on place called Brewster, which is up at Cape Cod. It's just the opposite on the inside, across the inlet, across the way was not Provincetown, was where the Kennedys lived. Anyway, we were on the poor side. Back then, the poor side. Anyway, it was a town called Brewster. We had a summer cottage there. So I told my mom the next morning, I said, I'm going up to Brewster, to the cottage, and which I normally did. And I said, I'll be up there a couple of weeks. So I went and got my buddy Lee Stotts. Lee Stotts was about one of two friends I had in the whole town we lived in, a little town called Granby. Now it's a big town, but back then it was nothing. And I said, let's go up to Lee, let's go up to the cottage. Okay, let's go. He's back from college. And so let's go up there. So we drive up there, and we partied a couple of days. And, the Cape Cod's party place. And then, so I said, I'm still brooding over this. So I got in the car and I drove up to Boston. And I went to I said, I'm pissed. I'm going to join the military. So I'm a pretty smart guy. I've been on the dean's list. I'm pretty book smart anyhow. And I went and took to the Air Force, took the test, impressed them. I happened to have at the time, a private pilot's license. And so the recruiter, he said, oh, yeah, you come in the Air Force, you're a private pilot, you'll be an officer. Well, I didn't have 4 years of college, but, he stretched it. Anyway, so I go take the physical and go down to Boston, take the physical, and I bombed it. And the reason is when you fill out the physical, you have to check if you ever had infantile paralysis, polio, and I did. And also, you ever have any other major surgeries? I said, yeah, I was born with a cleft palate. I have no roof to my mouth, so I talk funny. And then, of course, I had had an appendectomy, and then I've been in the hospital because I collected venomous snakes. And I once put my hand in looking for some copperheads, and about 3 or 4 got me and blew my arm up. So the guy looked at me. After I got the physical, I go back the next day. I'm ready to go. And he said, I can't take you. I said, what? He says, you're 4F. You bombed the physical. I said, oh. So I was dejected. So I walked out, and the recruiting station was not just one, it was a floor, and it had the offices. And the next office I walked by was the Navy. So I went in there. So I go up there, and I said, hey, I want to take this test. Well, I'd already taken it. Now I'm going to max it. Maxed it. This guy's going, oh, what do you want to do? And I said, oh, I got a private pilot's license. I go, oh, well, you can become a pilot like that. I'm going to send you down to have a physical. So I go down, same place. Don't lie. Filled out the same thing. The next day I go back up there. He says, you bombed the physical. So anyway, the story goes, the next day I went to the Army. Same thing. When the Army didn't have a flight program then, and they said, same thing, you bombed it. So the last shot, I walked by in Marine Corps, and I'm going to tell you, weighed about 135 pounds, had the worst case of acne, and was not a Marine. I walked in, and I went up, and the recruiter was at their desk, and he never looked at me. He was reading something. And I stood there in my mind for 20 minutes, probably for 30 seconds. Finally, I put my hands on his desk, and I just put them down there and said, and he never looked up. And all he said was, take your freaking hands off my desk. He looked up at me, and he probably just shook his head. And he said, what do you want? And I said, I want to join the Marine Corps. So he said, good luck played into this, great luck. So he said, okay, take this test. I took the test. Well, I'm an ace. I can do the test. And not against the Marine Corps or the Army, but if you look at the average IQ, they're on the bottom scale compared to the Air Force and the Navy. So he was impressed. I whacked out this thing, and I said, I got a private pilot's license. Oh, yeah, well, we can fix you right up. We can, when can you go? And I said, immediately. And he said, okay, I got to get you a physical. And I said, well, there's a problem there. I said, I've been down to the Air Force, the Navy, and the Army, and they keep telling me I'm 4F. And he said, you know why? And I said, no. So he gets on the phone, and he called one of them. And so then he said, okay, I hung it up. So he pulls out the form I'm going to have to fill out at the physical place. And he said, okay, you see this? Do not check any of this. Do not. Tell him about your appendectomy, but you don't have to tell them about anything else. They won't catch it. So I said, sure. And he said, and I can't send you back to Boston. They know you. So I'm going to send you to Springfield, Mass., which is the western part of the state. You got transportation? I got a car. So he said, okay, tomorrow morning be there at Old Dark 100. So I drove there, passed the physical, came back. He said, when do you want to go? I said, immediately. So he said, okay, be here. I think it was 2 days later. And so in June 19, actually it's first part of July, 1960, I joined Uncle Sam's Misguided Children. Now the reason that he took me, I've figured this out. I don't know if this is fact. But I have friends of mine that became recruiters. And apparently they have a quota. And he was probably dateless and desperate. And so he said, this is the end of the month and I haven't met my quota, and here's somebody that's vertical. And so off I went. So I went back, told Lee Stotts, I said, Lee, here's the keys to the car. You got to drive me up to the train station in Boston 2 mornings from now. I joined the Marine Corps. He said, what? I said, yeah. I said, stay at the house long as, as long as you want. Then when you drive back, take the car to the house and leave the car and give the keys to my mom. She asked me where I am. Tell her I joined the Marine Corps. Yeah. So I'm down there at boot camp, and not that long, maybe a week. And a drill instructor comes and calls me, and you're in a state of shock. I mean, you're just... And I was the smallest guy in the platoon, so I was a house mouse. Now, there's good reasoning for the house mouse takes care of the DI's room. Besides all your stuff, you take care of the DI's room. You have the keys to we're in Quonset huts, had the keys to the 3 Quonset huts, and I had to watch, and nobody else did. And they take the smallest guy because he needs the most buildup physically, and I didn't realize that then. But anyway, I was the mouse. So your DI called me Mouse. Get in here. You don't have a name. You're a mouse. And get in here. He said, come with me. So we go up to the colonel's, the battalion commander, lieutenant colonel, and maybe it was major. Anyway, we went up there and he said, he told me how to report. I didn't know what I was going in. I walked in there. My mom and dad are sitting there with the CO. My mom and dad had quite a lot of political clout within the Democratic Party in Connecticut. Fair. And I've done a lot of thinking about this over 65 years, thinking about this. My mom and dad were socialist, and the Democratic Party was definitely not Republican. So the Democratic Party was where they went, but they were on the left of that. And my mom did a lot of fundraising. We had a big house. We had a 6,000 square foot house, a big place. She did a lot of fundraising for the party in Connecticut. Anyway, so there they sat. And I go in, and I think it was Major, and he said, Private, I'm going to give you 5 minutes with your folks, and you're going to decide whether you stay in the Marine Corps or not. Because they were using political. Our lawyer was a guy named Anthony Armentano, who was the lieutenant governor. He was also our lawyer, Anthony. Anyway, so there I was. I was standing. My mom's crying. And my dad said, "What did you do?" And I said, "I joined the Marine Corps, and I'm not leaving. I dug my heels in the sand. I'm not leaving. I love it." I still can't believe I love it. So anyway, off they went. The guy came back, said, go back. And I went through boot camp as a house mouse. I graduated boot camp, went from there, Parris Island, South Carolina, to Camp Lejeune, actually Camp Geiger for infantry training. And then I went to Camp Lejeune, and then I was an 0331, a machine gunner. And so then I was attached to 5th Marines, and I did 3.5 years with them. And the truth is, I liked it. I liked the discipline. I liked the camaraderie, which I wasn't really familiar with because I only had, one friend, really good friend in private school, and 2 in where I was. So I really enjoyed it. I didn't mind being out in the mud and all that. come time to reenlist, the reenlistment guy comes down there, and I said, well, I want to go aviation. So he said, well, okay, you reenlist. So I reenlisted. I did 3.5 as in the grunt work, and then reenlisted for aviation. So I've flown around in helicopters as a grunt, and I said, I can do this. So I joined the Marine Corps aviation. And when I got sent to NAS, Memphis, Tennessee, you take a battery test. And I wanted to be a mechanic. That's because mechanics flew. And unfortunately, because I had a first-class FCC license, because I fooled around with radios. Back in the old days, vacuum tube theory, this is before transistors. I know nothing about it now, but the old days was tubes. And it was very basic. And so I said, I don't want to do this. Well, the Marine Corps said, you're going to be a aviation electronics tech. So I went to school for 40 weeks. So one of the reasons I did well, 2 reasons. One, I had a background, so I had a jump on everybody. I knew how to read resistors. I knew vacuum tube theory, why it worked. So I was ahead of the game with them. Then the second thing was the top 2 graduates of the class got choice of duty station. And everybody else wanted jets. I want jets. I wanted helicopters. Now, the difference is jets are clean and everything's clean, pristine. Helicopters, everything's leaking oils, hydraulic fluid. You're dirty. You're living in the field, and you get to fly with them. And so I went to, I finished second in my class. And the kid that finished first was a kid from Buffalo, New York. We're right outside of Buffalo, named Collins, TC, Top Cat, Tom Collins. Anyway, his brother was in Marine helicopters as well at New River, North Carolina, which is Camp Lejeune. So he said, I'm going there. So I said, I'm going there with you. We'll go together. And so I ended up there, and I landed there, and this is early 1964. And I landed there, checked in, and went to the main part of it called MABS. And what my job was I was in a little Connex box, air conditioned, and they bring me radios. And I worked on small FM ARC 44s, and I worked on UHF radios. Those, and once in a while radar sets. And that's what I worked on for about probably 6-8 months. I hated every minute of it. Hated it. And so I wanted to get out on the flight line. So I bugged the first sergeant enough to transfer me to an operating squadron, and he did. And I went to HMM 162. And that was a H-34 squadron. H-34 is the helicopter that if you ever saw I don't know. There was a movie in San Diego, TV show in San Diego with a helicopter where you sit high. You sit very high and they get in below it. It's called H-34. So I got transferred to that squadron. So when I got to the squadron, they said, okay, you're avionics. You're going to work in the shop. Now, the shop's different. There, you don't repair the radios. All you do is troubleshoot the airplane, pull the radio, put in a new one, send the radio back up the way. So at least I was on the flight line. So when you get off at 4 o'clock, and we're in the States, get off at 4, you're good till the following morning. But we had a night crew. So what I did was I get off at 4, and I went to the guy running the night crew, the sergeant, and I said, look, I want to learn to be a mech. And he looked, to this day, he probably is drinking somewhere, laughing about me. You want to be a mech, you got a clean job, you got an air condition. And I said, I want to be a mech. I want to learn it. And so he said, okay. So I worked at night crew for about 7, 8 months, including I made a cruise. We made a med cruise, which was 7 months. Plus I made a cruise to Norway, which I'd already been to Norway twice before as an infantryman, which is above the Arctic Circle in the wintertime. It's called snowflakes. And believe me, yeah, it's ridiculous. It's just brutal. But anyway, enjoyable. Let's just say that. Finally, I got the maintenance officer. I guess some of the sergeants told him about me. The maintenance officer called me in and said, look, if you want, I could put you out on the flight line. And I said, yeah, but, I'm avionics. And he said, what we'll do is put you avionics at night and you work flight line in the day. I said, I'm good to go. So then we got a cruise to, now this is early 65. We got a cruise to, it's called a Viegas cruise. You go down to all the islands, Puerto Rico, Barbados, you hit all the islands. So we go down there, and I primarily worked for this guy who was an Italian kid from South Philly, and I forgot his name. I wish I knew his name, because he taught me more than anybody in aviation's ever taught me. And he was brutal. I mean, for the first 2 months I worked for him, don't touch anything, and you just clean. And then he taught me how to safety wire. I knew how to safety wire, not to his standards. Everything was done by hand, and he'd check in. And if it depends on the gauge of the safety wire, how many turns. If it wasn't right, he'd cut it and say, do it again. The guy was brutal, but he was good, and he taught me. Well, we were down in outside of, I want to say we were outside of Jamaica. Dominican Republic Civil War broke out, 65. And we were the nearest thing to it. We were on a ship with a battalion landing team of Marines. They said, get there. So immediately, now you have crew chiefs with planes are putting the guns on. They need a door gunner. And the guy I was working with says, you're my door gunner. And so, which was normal. Your second mech, you're going to be the door gunner normally, unless you refuse to fly. And then they're going to put you in night crew. Anyway, so what I did was I flew down there as a door gunner for about the whole time down there. So when we come back to the States, he was getting discharged. And the maintenance officer called me in and said, I'm going to give you a secondary MOS, military officer job classification as a mechanic, which was unheard of to get it by OJT. A lot of people say I was the first to do that. People that I know say you were the first ever to go from a high MOS ranking. You went down and then got at OJT. So I got that, and he said, plus I'm going to give you, that's your airplane. You're the crew chief. I was in hog heaven. I was on flight skins. I had my own plane. I could work on it from dusk to dawn and dawn to dusk and back again. I loved that. So I was in that plane for till the first part of 66. And squadron next door was HMM 262, Bill's Bastards. And they were getting ready to deploy to Vietnam. I went to my first sergeant. I said, I want to go to Nam. And he said, what? And he said, yeah. I said, that's where I want to go. And so he said, okay. So he transferred me over there. I get over there and they said, well, you're avionics. You're not qualified to jet engine helicopter. So avionics shop. So I went back to avionics. So back to night crew. I'm helping them out and I worked at it. So I stayed in avionics and me and the avionics chief did not get along. He was an old World War II guy and he felt that he had his hands full with me. Let's just say that. He had his hands full with me. And first place, I checked in with a handlebar mustache, and that drove him nuts. He had shaved, and oh yeah, he didn't like me a bit. And then when he found out I was working at night, he said, "You want to work at night? You work with me at night. You're not going to work with them." But anyway, I worked with him, so I worked. So we get deployed to Vietnam with this H-46s. That's a tandem. Looks like a Chinook, but it's a baby Chinook. It's 2/3 the size. And so we shoot on over to Nam, and I'm a door gunner on the aircraft, the commanding officer's aircraft, Echo Tango 50. I'm the door gunner, and even though I'm avionics, I'm the door gunner. Because not everybody in the squadron wanted to fly in a combat zone because they were shooting at us, literally. And so I was flying. So what transpired was we had a mission one day in the south. We were landed at a place called Kiha, which is just south of Chuai, which is about on probably, I don't know, 60 miles south of Da Nang. And so we were working there, and we were working south of there in the, and up in the mountains. And we were taking a Marine recon team of, a heavy recon team of 6 Marines in our aircraft and 5 in the one behind us. And we were going out in Indian country, pretty far out there. So we go out there, and the pilot's the executive officer, a guy named Major Greg Corliss, who retired out a Major General. Greg Corliss was the pilot. The co-pilot was a guy by the name of Captain Wayne Julian, retired Lieutenant Colonel, was in Texas. So we go out, and in the briefing, we're going to put him on this side of this hill, and they said, you got to be careful because there's booby-trapped 500-pound bomb booby-trapped on this, and we don't want to set one of them off because that'd be the end. So we're going to go in there. So how we're going to do is go in there. First plane's going to set down, put the ramp down, and we're going to count to 15. Nothing fired, then they'll run out rather than just land and run out, because we knew this was going to be a problem. We had no gun support, just the 2 aircraft. Went in there and landed. And before we could put the ramp down, there was a machine gun nest, and I was on the left side of the aircraft, and on the probably when you look and do in the front of the aircraft, 12 o'clock at the 2 o'clock position, and he raked through the aircraft. Everybody was shot in the aircraft but me. Greg Corliss was shot in the arm, and Wayne Julian was shot to both legs. The crew chief was shot first in the leg, and then when he fell, the way he rolled, he got shot in the back. And then the 6 recon men were all shot, and one was shot between the eyes. A big red-headed Marine, big guy. He had red hair and wore Buddy Holly glasses on him, and he was a machine gunner. He was shot. I was the only one that wasn't. it happened like this, but it's slow motion. And I turned around because I turned around and looked, and one of the bullets had gone through the number one engine fuel line, which is about that big around, and it had went straight through, and it was spraying fuel from the back of the aircraft to the front. So I ran back, unfortunately stepped on these guys' engine, just stepped on there and grabbed this line and held it. And then we all had scarves, so I took my scarf off and John Wayne and tied it like that, and then pulled this machine gunner back. He was on the end of the ramp, and pulled him back and waited for us to get out of the LZ. We could not get out of the LZ without enough fuel going in the engine, and apparently me covering this fuel line gave enough fuel that Major Corliss was able to pull us out. We were on the side of a hill, and all he did was pull us out, and we drove to the ground, to the valley, and got enough airspeed to get flying. One of the things that happened was all the communications in the whole aircraft was severed. I don't know, I can't remember exactly how, but lines were severed. So there was no communication within the aircraft called ICS, and no communications with the outside. So our wingman comes to sees us bailing out, so he comes and lets his team off. Now, I don't remember this, but I've read enough about it. Apparently, between the time we were shot up and the time I went back to hold the fuel line, I went over to Dave Langlois's. He was screwing his gun, 50 cal, and saw who was shooting at us, and I unloaded 50 rounds. I unloaded it. And apparently I nullified, according to Wayne Julian, I've talked to him, he said, you nullified, your shooting stopped what was going on. But I don't remember that. Anyway, so we're flying back, and I pull this guy back, and I look, and his pack is smoke. And I'm in fuel up to probably up past my ankles. It was spraying in the aircraft. So you have your Marine, take out your K-bar, and I cut the pack off, and I threw it out, and it went out the back ramp, and we were about 1,000, no, not even that, probably 600 feet off the ground, and before it hit the ground, it exploded. Our wingman's behind us, and he sees this, and he thought we were taking airburst. So he's calling, they're taking airburst. Anyway, we couldn't maintain altitude. So we went up the valley to the end of this valley, which was probably 5-7 miles. And we landed at a little Arvin outpost that had 2 or 3 105 artillery pieces in it, and literally landed hard. And as soon as we landed, I put the ramp down to get the fuel out. And then I started dragging out the wounded. And I went up to finally walked up to the front. Captain Julian couldn't get out because he was shot in the legs, both legs. So I had to go outside, open the door, and pull him out that way. And then Major Corliss came out, and he said, start taking triage. There were no Americans at this little place we were at. And so, they had a medic on board. So he was working. So our wingman lands. What happened? So Greg Corliss, he's the XO. He tells the co-pilot of the wingman to get out of the plane. We got to go back and get the other team members. So I said, I'll go too, because I know where they are. And he said, no, you stay here. So just before they lifted off, don't tell me no. I hop in the plane, and off we go. So there's a door, the 50 cals here, and there's a door here. That's from the plane. And so I'm standing in the door, and we're rolling in, and to pick up the crew members, the rest of the recon team. And their team call sign recon team was basketball. And I've tried to find guys on the team over the years. I have tried to find. Anyway, so we land. Now we're firing up, shooting like crazy. The guys on the ground don't know why, because everybody, the MVA were dead. There were 4 dead in the machine gun nest, which I found out later. But anyway, we pull them out, we bring them back, and so we land, and because we got to pick up the co-pilot that we left. And I tell Major Corliss, I'll stay with the aircraft. And the Vietnamese will steal everything out of it. And I'll get it ready because it can't fly out. We're going to have to swing load it, bring in a big helicopter to pick it up, take it home. Because it had 51 hits in it, 51 bullet holes in it. And there was a lot of damage. So I said, I'll spend, don't worry, going up, I'll stay here with it. Well, I spent the night with it, which was sort of spooky, because not only the NVA, but there's the Aardman all around me, and I'm the only American. And, John Wayne, you could talk all you want about John Wayne. That wasn't my day of being John Wayne. So the next morning, we pick up the aircraft, and I've got it all ready, except taking the blades off. I didn't take the blades off. I can't. It takes 4 people to take the blades off. But I got it all ready to go to get out. So we swing it back to Keha. We get back to Keha and we land. And so I go, once I get out of the aircraft and the aircraft lands, I go over to the aircraft. And I'll never forget this. I was just sitting on the ramp. And it was finally hitting me. Well, now, everybody comes out and they're counting the bullet holes. I'm thinking, oh, gee, And Dave Langlois was a good friend of mine. I mean, the crew chief, we're squadron mates. He was good, Dave. And the best man at my first wedding was a kid named Jimmy Axton, and he was there, and he came, he put his arm around me. Next thing I know, the sergeant major comes up and says, Sergeant White, Bill the Colonel, Bill Shadrick wants to see him. I said, okay, so I go on. So just before I get in, a guy, Master Gunnery Sergeant E.R. Smith grabs me and he says, don't say a word. Do not say a word. We got you covered. I don't know what the hell he's talking about. So I walk in, report, and there's the avionics chief right there. And I'm not going to mention his name, but he's deceased now. And he and I didn't like each other. Let's just say that. Anyway, so I go in and report, and he said, Sergeant White, you're here for an Article 15, which is and I'm looking at it, yes, sir, what's the charges? And he said, direct disobedience of a lawfully given order in a combat zone. Now, I'm not a jailhouse lawyer, but I'm pretty smart. And I'm thinking, this in a combat zone, this ups the ante. So he says, what do you want to do? And I said, I want a general court-martial. I'm not going to take on Article 15 admits your guilt. So I said, what are the charges? And he said, the charges are that you did, on my helmet, you did not take, I had big yellow letters, FU, communism. And he said, the Master Gunnery Sergeant, avionics chief, gave you a direct order multiple times to take it off. And so I said, well, sir, he said, you got anything to say? And now this is the day after I've been shot to crap. So I looked at it, I said, you know what? If he had done his job in World War II in Korea, I wouldn't be here right now. Which my CO, Bill Shadrick, had been in Guadalcanal. He'd also been at Korea. He was 27-year Marine, full burn. And I'm telling him, this guy didn't do his job. And he looked at me and he said, well, before you sign the papers for a general court-martial, here's what I recommend. And I had with me Master Gunnery Sergeant, Assistant Maintenance Chief. E.R. Smith lives in Northern California now, old guy, got to be in his 90s. And he said, Master Sergeant Smith recommends that you tone down your helmet. I'm going to transfer you out of avionics shop, and you're going to be my crew chief, and I want my airplane back up. I said, I'll plead guilty to that. And so I walk out, and I'm no longer in avionics. I have my own airplane. Unfortunately, Dave Langley never came back to the unit. He was shot up that bad. But I ended up the commanding officer's crew chief. I've never been through A school or B school as a mechanic. And I was a twidget, they call electronics guy, but I crewed. Subsequently, that two guys that I knew did this same thing I did. They cross-trained in Vietnam to become mechanics and flew. And one of them's a very, very, very good friend of mine, Red Logan. He became a mech too. But anyway, so I flew my ass off, and that includes caisson and all that. And just before, probably in the spring of '66, I went out on R&R, and Jimmy Axton, his best man at my wedding, Jimmy and I, he was in avionics, and he was corporal. Whenever he could fly, he flew with me. So he said, we were on flight skins, and we both got R&Rs to Hong Kong. And I said, let's go. They're going to Hong Kong and raise hell, you know. So we go there, and we, as a side note, we go to Hong Kong, Jimmy and I, and we come back, and my plane at the time was in a 100-hour overhaul. So it wasn't ready to go back up the caisson. So it was going to be like a day or two. And so Jimmy said, I'll go up to caisson, and when you get up there, we'll swap. I'll be your gunner again, we'll swap. Fine. So he took off. And later that day, I was working on the plane, and Sergeant Major Ralph B. Holmes came out to me with John Ackley. John had a real high voice, weighed 230 pounds, and was a Marine heavyweight boxer. And he and I, and a few of us, we got into it. And, yeah, we were great. Loved the guy, John. He's passed away now. Anyway, John and the Sergeant Major came down and come here. So we lost a plane, and Jimmy Axton was killed. And broke me up. So anyway, the reason I bring this up was years later, I was in the Bay Area, and a news crew was doing a thing about Vietnam veterans, and they talked to me, and they said, and basically it's a quickie, and they said, what's the best time or what's the worst time Vietnam? And the worst time was losing Jimmy Axton. So I talked about it, and then I thought, that was stupid. Jimmy's folks live here. He's from Oakland. So I think I'll call him and tell him, look, I don't want you to watch TV and this guy comes on and start talking about your son that was killed. So I called information. There was 2 accidents living in Oakland. One at 123 Nice Street and one at 189476 116th Way or Place or something. And I said, well, Oakland is a racially divided city. So I said, well, I've got all what I'm going to say on a 3x5 card because I know it's going to be emotional, and I'm an emotional guy. So I said, I'm going to try the other one first because I'm sure just 123 Nice is where they live. So I dial the phone and pick up. A little girl answers the phone. I hear kids playing, and this little girl's voice said hello. And I said, yeah, I said, my name's Jim White, and I'm looking for the family of Jimmy Axton. He was with me in Vietnam. And the little girl's voice said, that was my son. And about killed me. Anyway, I had a great talk with her. Told her what I had talked about. I said, I don't want you to watch TV or have a neighbor say somebody's talking about Jimmy on, she was real nice. And at the end of the conversation, she says, if there's anything I can do for you, here's a woman that lost her only son. Her only son. Is there anything I can do for you? Let me know. And well, of course, my 3x5 cars, they were worthless. So when in the talk, I said, you don't really know who I am. And she said, yes, I do. And I said, no, I don't think so. She said, yeah, I have your picture on the mantle. And I thought, what? You have my picture on the mantle? And she said, when Jimmy's effects came home in his camera, the last picture was when you and him were together at the airport at Hong Kong, ready to come back to Nam. So that picture was taken basically a day, 2 days before he was killed. And I'm going to tell you, I'm haunted by that. I've had losses, but that one haunts me. Jimmy, he's just his smiling face. California kid, pure 100% California boy. Had a black GTO 65 GTO chrome rims. Yeah. Anyway, so go back. I get caught. We're out on the ship. We deploy out. You rotate on the ship with a battalion of Marines. We're going up to the DMZ. And so we're on the ship, and we're having awards and decoration ceremony, and I'm not into that. I had a big old handlebar mustache. I always had a little bit too long hair, and I don't do crap for medals. I don't, that's not me. I just don't like it, and I hate it. So we're on ship. Well, I'm a captive audience on ship. So we got a A&D ceremony, so the squadron fills out, and we're on this deck, and it's going. We got our aircraft shoved in the back, and so they line us up, and all of a sudden they line me up, and I'm right next to the colonel and the major, and then me, and then a captain or major and a captain. What the hell's going on here? Why am I here? So I told the sergeant major, hey, you made a mistake. I'm in the back row. Anyway, he said, no, you just stand there. So the guy that's presenting the medals is a guy named Victor Kulak, 3-star general, a legend in the Marine Corps. And at the time, he was a senior Marine of the Western Pacific. He was based out of Hawaii. He was about 5'4". His son ended up the commandant of the Marine Corps. His kid ended up a 4-star. But he was about 5'4". And in the Marine Corps, you never, when you report, you never look at somebody in the eyes. You look through them or over their head and you stare, you know. So I got the top of this hat. So he gets in front of me and he says, gives me this medal. And the medal was, I'd already won some medals in the Marine Corps, but this is a big one because it was a Distinguished Flying Cross. And my claim to fame was I was the first enlisted Marine to receive a Distinguished Flying Cross since since World War II. It was a huge deal. Huge deal. They had cameras and all this. Anyway, so I'm standing there and he gives it to me, and I'm looking at my sergeant major. I keep looking because you can't look down at this general. I'm looking. And he asked me, Sergeant White, what do you want to do in the Marine Corps? And so I said, sir, I want to be a flying peon. Now, the flying peons were World War II guys that were sergeants that never got commissions that were pilots. And we had one. Our sergeant major was command pilot. Flew in World War II as a flying sergeant, Korea flying sergeant. Couldn't fly fixed wings anymore. They put him in helicopters. These guys were little, and I didn't know it at the time. I knew there were very few, but at the time we were down to less than 20 in the whole Marine Corps. Anyway, I said, sir, I want to be a flying peon. And he said, you flying peon? What? He said, what makes you think you could do that? And I said, well, I have a commercial fixed wing license. I had worked my time. I'd gotten my 160 hours. I have a commercial fixed wing license. He said, you have 4 years of college? I said, no, sir. He said, well, you can go to NAVCAD. Are you married? And I said, yes, sir. Can't go to NAVCAD. So he said, and we're not making, and my sergeant major standing right next to him. He goes, we're not making any of these son of a bitches anymore. We're trying to get rid of them. Now, my belief, I don't know if this is fact, but my belief is that Kulak and my sergeant major knew each other. They had to back in the old Corps because the old Corps wasn't that big. When World War II broke out, there was only 1,200 officers in the whole Marine Corps. There was only 17,000 enlisted men. So if you're in aviation, you even reduce that by at least 90%. Everybody knew everybody. So he said, we're not making any more of these sons of bitches. I'll never forget that. These sons of bitches, and we're trying to get rid of them now. And Sergeant Major, I looked at the Sergeant Major, and Anyway, so he says, here's what I'll do. I can transfer you to the Army. And they'll take you as a warrant. So my thought was, I'll take this, go do minimum time in the Army, come back in the Marines. Transfer back, I'll be a Marine pilot. And we said, yes, sir. So basically, I forgot about him. We're at Quezon. There's a siege going on early this January, February, March, April, the siege. And it was bad. It was horrible. Every aircraft, we had 24 aircraft, and in the first 30 days, we lost 28. We went through aircraft that quick. Now you got to figure we moved from 4-man crews to 5, meaning you had 2 door gunners and a crew chief, and you were, okay. So we had 1 aircraft in our squadron where we lost 22 men, meaning we were taking guys out to Quezon to work on damaged aircraft, and they were shot down and gone. So Quezon was an SOB. It was tough. You land there, and to pick up wounded at the strip, and they had to run to put them in there because we'd take incoming. they watched us. This, when the helicopter's coming in, our CO at the time was a guy named Dave Althoff, Althoff, from Phoenix, Arizona area. He became the Marine Aviator of the Year. He received 3 Silver Stars in less than 3 weeks. He's the guy that figured out, or he made a thing called the gaggle on how. Used to be we'd go into an area to resupply Hill 881, 861 north, south. We'd go in, one plane, we'd go in, land, and they had the thing zeroed in, land, throw out the ammo, the water, and replacements, and pick up the medevacs and peel out. And you were going to get shot up pretty bad up in there. In fact, like I say, we lost 28 aircraft in our first month flying there. It was horrible. We only had 24. They were replacing, bringing aircraft up from other squadrons. We didn't have time to mark their markings off. We'd get them in the morning, they'd be flying that afternoon out there. So it was tough. And for group guys, 256, 260 guys, we put in long hours, especially at night with a red flashlight fixing them. But great guy, unbelievable. So if you were going to go to Quezon, you were going with HMM 262, the Flying Tigers. You were going there and with us. And if you were coming out, you were coming out with us, whether in a body bag or a medevac, you were coming out with us. Anyway, it was so bad that you just didn't have time to think. And we were running on adrenaline. You couldn't. At night, everybody was underground bunkers. And the rats didn't eat us. They ate what we threw there. But you'd be sleeping into it. And I'm telling you, these rats were this big. They'd come up on you. Get the hell away from me like that. I mean, the conditions, and I'm a sort of history buff, made me think of World War I, the trenches. It was horrible. And they had the highland, and we were taking direct rocket fire and artillery fire from North Vietnam. That's how close we were. It was direct. So when the planes would come in, they even got a C-130 coming in, landing. They hit him with a motor, boom, killed half the crew in the C-130. Got so bad, C-130s couldn't come in and deliver cargo. So what they did was come in low level, pop out a parachute, and slide across the. It was, yeah. The grunts on the ground. Guys tells me he's a Quezon vet. He's got total respect because I've been there. So anyway, in late February, I'm flying and they say, "Hey, White," Dave Althoff, his crew chief. He says, "Hey, grab your stuff. You got to go back to Quang Tri, our rear echelon place." I said, "Why?" And he said, "You just go on back there." He said, "You got to go back to see Sergeant Major." So my mom had been fighting on and off cancer, and I'm thinking, this is emergency leave. I can see this. So I go back there, and Sergeant Major says, "No." He says, "You're going to Okinawa for discharge. You're going to be out. You're going in the Army." And I said, "Wow." General Kulak followed through. His aide taking all the notes and followed through. So I get up to Okinawa, I get discharged, go over to Butler, get sworn in, and there's 5 of us. There's myself, a Marine Staff Sergeant, 2 squids, Navy guys, Air Force guy. We all have commercial licenses. So they said, you guys all go back to the States. So they said when we're processing, all the guys say, well, can I get leave? Can I get leave? Well, when they come to me, they say, how much leave you want? I don't want any leave. Just send me back. Let's get this done. I want to get back over here. And so I got orders back to I forgot the base, Fort Polk, Louisiana. And from there, I'd go right into the flight school thing, helicopter school program. Well, I get there, and I'm the square peg in the round hole. You didn't go through you haven't been through boot camp. Marines don't go through other people's boot camp. You people go through Marines camp, but we don't go through. Well, we're going to have to figure out what the hell to do with you. So while you're waiting, here's what we want you to do. You come in and check in every morning. Just come by, see the first shirt. I said, well, my grandmother lives up here in East Texas, which is about 2.5 hours away. Can I go see her? Okay, call in. So I did that for about a week. And my grandma and I weren't close until then. And then it was great. I loved it. A little one-horse town, and I mean one-horse town in East Texas, Mineola, Texas. And side story, I met the guy. I'm pumping gas in uniform when I get there. I'm pumping gas, and the sheriff, or actually the chief of police, 2 policemen down, the chief, he drives by, sees this guy in uniform, and he swings around. And it's the old gas station, the old kind of gas station with a lid, on it. And I'm there, and I know my grandmother's next street to the right. So pulls up behind me, gets out. It's typical Southern sheriff, but he's policeman. Walks up and he said, where are you going? And I said, I'm going up here to see my grandmother. He said, who's your grandmother? And I said, Miss Burks. He said, Miss Burks, which one are you? And I said, I'm Maggie's boy. And he said, Maggie's boy? Oh, okay. He said, well, good. He said, I'll follow you up there. And he followed me up and make sure. So when I get out, I'm going up to walking. My grandmother had like 5 acres and 4 oil pumps in the back. Boom, boom, boom. That's her income, 4 oil pumps in the back. Anyway, so he says, if you're in town, come on in the morning for breakfast. We all meet at the cafe and the dude drop in, cafe, about whatever time. I said, sure. Friendly. So I spent a couple of days with my grandmother. So then I go down. One morning I said, I'm going in town. And actually I took her pickup. She had a 1951 Chevy pickup, old pickup. And I said, I'm going to take it in, get your oil changed, tires. And I actually had new tires put on her. She never serviced it. I took it in. So I go into the cafe, and there he is holding court with 4 or 5 other old timers. The banker, and I mean the bank was the size of this room, and a couple other people. And so, hey, come here. And he said, this is Maggie's boy. And they all knew Maggie. So they started telling stories about my mom. Turns out the chief of police used to date my mom in high school. This is a great story. So he's telling me about her. My mom is, my dad's 5'8", my mom's 6'2". They're both deceased, but It was a funny thing. My mom was very outspoken, vocal. My dad never said a word. To this day, I used to tell him, she said, you be at the synagogue tomorrow morning at 9:00. And he said, yes, ma'am, and showed up. I mean, that's not true, but I like to think it was, because she was a true Texas woman. Let's just say that. Anyway, so he says, your mom played basketball. And I said, well, I wouldn't be surprised. She's a big girl. She's tall. She's slender and tall and athletic. He said, yeah, and what's amazing is in the county, after the basketball game, they go out and back and settle it. And I never saw your mom lose a fight. And I thought, Jesus, my mother you're talking about. Years later, I'm on the back patio of our house and tipping some scotch. And I said, Mom, I visited Grandma, and I was an officer there. And I said, I visited Grandma. And she, oh, yeah, did you have a good time? I said, a wonderful time. And I forgot the cop's name. And I said, who I ran into there? It's the chief of police. And I mentioned her name. And she looked at me and he said, yeah, he told me all about you. And she gave me a look. And my mother gave me that look. That was the end of it. And I said, yeah, okay. She went to her grave. Never mentioned it again. Never. But anyway, long story short, I go back to the base. First sergeant says, hey, I don't know what the hell we're going to do with you. You're screwed up the whole program. Maybe a month before we can get you into the mix. So he says, I said, so what the hell do I do? And he said, well, what do you want to do? He said, there's nothing here. I can't. I said, he is a master blaster, master jumper. I said, can you weasel away where I can go to jump school and come right back? And he said, you serious? I said, yeah. So he said, yeah, I can. Let me make some phone call. So he sends me to jump school. I go to jump school, and I know I'm going right back and go to flight school. Finish jump school, and when I'm finished, I go to see the first shirt, and I said, he says, I talked to the other first shirt in Louisiana, and nothing's come down about you. And I said, oh, Jesus. I said, at that time, Ranger school was 3 weeks. And it's right there. It's a week there, and you just walk around and try not to get lost in the southern pines. There's no distinguishing marks, so everything's got to. You can get lost easy indirectly. You can't. There's no mountain to look at. No, So there's a week there, a week in Delega, Georgia, and a week in Eglin Air Force Base area swamps. Well, I don't have a problem with hot weather swamps. I'm not afraid of snakes at all. I collected them. That's not it. But I'm going to tell you, I'm afraid of heights. I know. You jump out of planes, you fly. But I'm afraid of heights. Going up a ladder right here, I think about it. So anyway, I said, well, can you get me into Ranger school? And I think it was 3 bottles of bourbon, I think is what it cost me to give him. And I got to Ranger school, finished Ranger school, come back, and he said, okay, here's your orders. And I looked at him and I said, wait a minute. These aren't to flight school. He said, these come down. So I got assigned to an infantry unit as a grunt infantry sergeant. And on a frag to Vietnam. So I go to Vietnam, now I'm infantry, and I go there, and I went to 1st Battalion, 6th Infantry, the 198th. So I go there, and I check, and I tell them, look, I'm not supposed to be here. I'm supposed to be in flight school. And that first sergeant said, yeah, sure. Next, go. You're a sergeant, go down. So I go and I go out in the bush for a couple months, almost 3 months. And lo and behold, first sergeant calls me, you get on the helicopter, you got to go back. What do you want, Top? He said, hey, you were supposed to be in flight school. We got orders to send you back to the States for flight school. So I'm thinking, I just did 3 months in as a grunt, which I respect those guys, but I've been a Marine. I've been a machine gunner. I didn't like playing machine gunner. I was a sergeant then. I just didn't want me to be a grunt over there. So I go back, I go through flight school, I graduate flight school, and I get sent back to Nam right away, which is okay. I have to say I enjoyed it. So I get to Vietnam, get off, and everybody's in shell shock. I've already done 19 months in Vietnam. I did 4 months in Dom Rep, and then I had done a week under 3 months with the Army as a grunt in Vietnam. So we get off down by Saigon. We go to 95th Repo Depot, and they march you like cattle in there. And I finally get up. I'm a wobbly one. I got my wings, and I got my. In fact, I have multiple set of wings. I have my pilot wings, and I have of course, my jump wings, and a CIB, which is all Army. And I also have, on top of that, Marine Combat Air Crew wings, which are illegal to wear there. You're supposed to wear them there. But they're combat wings. I wore them before I got a CIB. So I get up to the table, and the major looks at me, and he says, you returnee? And I said, yeah. He said, where would you like to go? Now, everybody else is going here, you're going there, and you're going, where would you like to go? I said, I want to go as far north as you can send me, up by the DMZ. I said, I know that area. I was a Marine in that area. I know that area. So he turned around and looked at the map, and he said, there's a unit up in Dong Ha, which I know Dong Ha. I flew out of there. Dong Ha is about 2 miles from North Vietnam, right on the Ben Hai River, just down from Quang Viet. So I said, I'll take it. Well, he said, okay. Why would he go there? Because the stories about the DMZ, and that's the DMZ, and I Corps are different. Vietnam's basically 3 different landscapes. There's the DMZ, there's the Central Highlands, and then there's the Delta. And basically fighting there is 3 different styles of fighting. And if you talk to most people, they'll say, send me down south. You don't hear anybody say, oh, send me as far north as you want to go. You got it. Anyway, so I go up there and I check in. And so when I check in, this is amazing. I check in and they said the colonel, he was promotable to general, meaning he's got the P's, waiting to become a general. We'll see you in a minute. And what are those wings? And what's that handlebar mustache? And what's that patch? Now, the Army wears combat patches, the Marine Corps doesn't. Once again, I cheated. For a combat patch, I legally could wear the 2nd Marine Aircraft Wing or the 1st Marine Aircraft Wing or the 198th Army. Okay? But I wore the 1st Marine Division patch because the 1st wing patch and his 2nd wing patch, they look like crap. And nobody know what they are, but they know what that 1st Marine Division patch is. And he looked at it, and this was the S1. He was a major, I think. Maybe a lieutenant colonel, maybe a major. He looked at that and he said, how old are you? Because it says Guadalcanal on it. I was up here with the 1st Marine Division before you knew where Vietnam was, which just ticked him off good. So, I started off on the right foot there. So I go in to report, and I walk in, and the colonel who's waiting for a star is a black man. And I never heard of a black full colonel, never mind one who's going to be a general. So Roscoe Cartwright stands up. He's about 6'3", shaved head, and we welcome aboard. And this guy was no nonsense guy. And he said, you want to fly for me? And I said, yes, sir. What have you? He said, okay, welcome aboard. So we were flying at the time, 2 different kind of aircraft. We were flying OH-23Gs. G's don't mean guns. This is the bubble aircraft that looks similar to what you see on MASH. This was a Korean War aircraft and a trainer. And we were flying these in combat. Now, if you lose an engine in one, you immediately look between your legs, because that's where you're going to land. They land like a rock. And they're avgas. If you take a bullet, they're not jet fuel. Avgas has a much lower flash point. And they're gone. So we had 6 of those, and we had 6 OH-6s, which look like an egg. And so I wasn't checked out in the 6. So I immediately got checked out in the 6. And we flew those, and we flew basically ash and trash for about maybe 2 months. And I went to the colonel, and I said, Colonel Cartwright, we're taking rocket fire every night. So let's try this. Let's run an early morning VR and a late evening VR. Now, we can't count on anybody doing it for us, so let's equip 2 aircraft to do that. That means put a minigun on it, put a door there. And so I said, I'll run this operation. And he said he went along with it. So we started doing the VRs, and I flew for him for 7 months in the DMZ of YMVRs. My platoon leader was a guy named Jim Mitski, Captain Jim Mitski. He was ADA, Aerial Defense Artillery, ADA guy, from a little town called Harold, Texas, up by the Panhandle. His mom was I think his mother was the postmistress and ran the county store. It's a 1-horse town. Boom. Anyway, Jimbo was he went to, I think he went to college in Oklahoma on a football scholarship. Anyway, great guy, wonderful guy, big Jimbo. So Jim extends and says, I'm out of here. I'm going to extend and fly Cobras for ARA, Aerial Rocket Artillery, because the units, there were 3 units. Charlie Battery was the Griffins. They were flying for Special Forces into Laos, North Vietnam, long range MACV-SOG. That's their mission. So Jim and I talked about it, and he extended. I extended 3 weeks later, went to the same unit, checked in. He's my platoon leader. So, and I'm going to see him this August, and I haven't seen him since 1970. And I'm really looking forward to it.
Can I check the battery real quick?
Sure.
Okay. All right, yeah, go ahead.
So, just before I leave the unit to go to flying for the Griffins, just before I leave, we were doing we'd go out early in the morning, just very light, and go into the DMZ really right. And actually, I'd cross the DMZ, go into North Vietnam, no more than a mile, no more, because that's Indian country. And if you get shot down there, you're really in a mess. So I went out there one morning and had a high aircraft over me, and I went out there and we were looking for rockets and what have you. Coming back, I crossed a ridge line. Now this is rolling hills, so I'm low level. Loaches, I like flying very low. Propensity of getting nailed from a one-shot Charlie is there, but nothing like if you're at 1,000 feet, everybody can shoot at you. So my theory is go low and as fast as hell. Relatively, in a scout position, you're doing 40 miles an hour, not fast. And we're good enough that I can actually trace a blood trail. We hit NBA, I can trace their tracks. And depending on the moisture, if we've had rain let's say the day before, and there's no rain in the footprints, I know those are very fresh. Or if it's in the morning and we had a heavy dew that night before, there's nothing I can tell you within reason now how old the foot tracks are. I'm not, and this is not me. This is scout pilot talk now. We're pretty good at scouts. So I'm coming back over ridgeline, and there was machine guns set up on the backside. When I came over, he got me from the backside, raked my aircraft, and I took, I think 31 hits, if I remember. I blew out my windshield and my control, my instruments going that way. I took three hits in the armor seat, and my crew chief door gunner, a kid named Langshan, was gut shot, fell out, but he was on a monkey cord, he fell out. And to this day, I don't know why, but I even took one round up by the compressor in the engine. I kept flying. Anyway, I flew it back to 18 surge, landed, and the plane, as soon as I landed, the fuel was coming out. I mean, it was dead. That was it. And so I said, I'm just getting hairy up here now. So the very next morning, I went back out, and I knew where the enemy was, that ridge line. So I went back there, and I was going to come around and get him from another way. And so when I had a new crew chief, and I told him, look, this guy, he's on this ridge line somewhere. He caught me from the back. So we're going to attack the ridge line from perpendicular and run down the side of it. And as soon as you see it, you throw out the smoke, and he has a 60. And I said, rake it. And then what we'll do is we'll turn around, and then we'll come in where the smoke is directly at him, and I'll use my minigun. So anyway, they got us pretty good. Neither of us were hit, but the aircraft was the bells and whistles. It wasn't going to fly any further. So I got it about maybe a click and a half away when I drove it into the ground. I mean, it just wouldn't fly anymore, and poof. So my wingman picked me up, called in, said, hey, White's down, lost the aircraft. And I told him, get another aircraft ready. We're going back out. And so I had the same crew chief. We went back out with a different aircraft. And now we got a couple of Cobras from the CAV came up to help us. And so I went, we marked it, and I got blasted again. And this time I made it closer to the base before I drove it into the ground. Like I said, bad day. Anyway, my wingman picked me up. High ship came pick me up. I said, get another one ready. So we went out a third time, and the Cobras were working the area. They did a great job. So then when they made, they said, go ahead and go in there and check. So I went in there to check, and I mean, God, this guy, he had the 9 lives of a cat, man. He just blasted the hell out of me. So I made it back to my first aircraft, and literally the 2 aircraft, when I crashed it, and this was a good crash, when we finally got out of the plane, we were less than 500 feet from the first aircraft that I had down. So I get in the plane, my wingman comes in, gets us, and we go back, and I said, get another airplane. When I land, Colonel Cartwright standing there, and he said, come here, you to the club. And I said, wait a minute, sir, I know where they are. And he said, they know where you are, to the club. I can't afford you. You've already cost me 3 aircraft this morning. And so 2 days later, my paperwork was in. I got transferred to Flying Cobras. This is the why I never even thought going back in the Marine Corps. I'll go to Fly Cobras, and I go. Our unit had 3 platoons, and we had to keep 1 platoon, 4 aircraft assigned to Special SOG, which everybody thinks is Special Operations Group. That's not what it was. It was Studies and Observation Group. The reason that was to keep the press from understanding what we were doing. They thought we were, a bunch of Green Berets, with calculators or with slide rules. It's funny as hell. But anyway, we signed 26 pieces of paper saying that we couldn't talk about what we did, nothing, for 25 years. And the unit, until Ronald Reagan, he opened it up. Until then, you couldn't tell anybody you were SOG and what we did. So SOG basically is real simple. Studies and Observation Group was part of Op Plan 35, which was the CIA operated with the Joint Chiefs of Staff mission, where we did long-range reconnaissance, some pilot recovery, some the Air Force didn't like it, and I'll talk about that later. Some shady psychological warfare items, but primarily POW snatches, where we try to get their high-ranking members of the North Vietnamese forces so we can interrogate them. Anyway, this was to take place in not South Vietnam, in Cambodia, Laos, North Vietnam, parts of Burma, and the 5 southern provinces of China. Indian country. Now, to be honest, helicopters couldn't reach China. Otherwise, we'd have been there, but we couldn't reach it. The SOG was broken down to different layers. As far as our concern was, there was CCS, CCC, and CCN. CCS is Command and Control South, which is basically all operations in Cambodia. CCC was basically northern Cambodia, southern Laos. CCN was middle of Laos, North Vietnam. So our job was to basically insert recon teams. Recon teams were usually 2 or possibly 3 Americans. and 3 to 5 mercenaries. And these guys were, they could be Chinese nuns, they could be the Montyard people, which were the greatest. Yeah, I mean, I can't say enough about those guys. Just wonderful people, and loyal to us to a fault. I mean, to a fault. It cost them their lives, but they got paid. Our Special Forces guys, you can be a Green Beret, got sent to Vietnam, and you couldn't volunteer for SOG. They came and asked you. It was a very small group of guys, very small, probably less than the whole war, 1,000. Very small, very compartmentalized. Our teams, if we were putting a team in, let's say, at this spot, the team that's down here maybe 15 miles away didn't even know about that team. So our package included 4 Cobras from our unit, 4 transport helicopters, usually from the 101st Airborne, Slicks, Hueys. Usually 1 FAC, or maybe 2 Air Force FACs, Covey. Now, if a recon team got in trouble and they called what's called a prairie fire, that's the worst thing. They're surrounded or whatever. Prairie fire, once they called prairie fire, that went up on guard. Every aircraft, fixed wing, bomber, was to stop their mission and go to them. So literally, when they got in trouble, they can literally instantly get 20 or 30 fast movers on top of them. The problem is they're dropping bombs that, versus us, we're shooting rockets. We get down and dirty with them, literally down. I can throw a pair of rockets in between 25 feet. Whereas a bomber, he's trying to hit the top of the hill. So I'm not against the Air Force. The Air Force did a great job, especially when you get things like Spectre gunships and like those are at night, where they can just circle around and just hose the area. Or in the early days, it was Puff the Magic Dragon. But we fired rockets, and we were good at what we did. We were damn good. So we kept 4 aircraft. We had 3 platoons. So the rotation is 1 platoon would go up to CCN. 1 platoon would be on regular missions for that day, and 1 platoon would be on standby. So that's 4 aircraft, but each platoon had 6 aircraft. So the 2 aircraft that were not being used were being serviced. So if you have, but not everybody volunteered for CCN because you had to sign papers. And we had guys that said, I don't want to fly. I have a very good friend of mine that lives here in the state of Washington, who was a Griffin, who did fly CCN. But if you asked him, he would rather not. He didn't want to fly CCN, but he did fly it. But we had pilots that said, I don't want CCN. I'm not signing the papers. I'm not going to do that. Here's what happens. If you get shot down, they don't get your body out. They notify your family you were lost at sea. Body not recovered. Because we weren't there. My flight records for CCN flights, which For me, I flew 140 hours a month, and probably 2/3 of that was CCN. And that's all blacked out. Just redacted. That's it. That's the name of the game. You sign paper. And the guys that flew it constantly, Rick Freeman, myself, Chemitsky, Mock, Gary Gluth, Krusty Garrison, who lives here, up here in Kettle Falls. We flew our ass off. We loved it. Because when you took off, you knew you were going to shoot. You knew you were going to. We knew we were going to shoot. Plus, it was a free fire area. We weren't in Vietnam. We didn't need clearances to shoot. Just if you saw somebody running around in a field down there, we knew where the recon teams were. He wasn't one of us. Just take him out. No harm, no foul. It was, for a gun pilot, it was the best. I didn't have to get clearances or anything. Plus, the camaraderie you built with the recon teams was huge. You save a team, when they come back and they get out of their aircraft, they run up to the Cobras, and you've got the windows open and you're cooling down the engine. They come up. I've had a guy come up and kiss me, said, "I owe you," because he was in deep shit. That's exactly it. And the Cobras. And I once, this guy just died, and this is the legend. And for anybody interested in the history, they ought to read about this guy. Everybody talks about great Americans. There's a guy that just passed away here last year named Billy Waugh, Sergeant Major Billy Waugh, W-A-U-G-H. You ever hear of him? Billy Waugh, I gave him his 9th Purple Heart. I shot him in the ass. He was on a recon mission as a strap hanger. That means extra guy. They were in to pick up they were in there trying to snatch a POW on an engineering unit. They were building a road or something. And so Billy Billy went in to collect souvenirs. That's the truth. So he's out there collecting all this crap. Anyway, the NVA once they get on the ground, they're only going to stay there. There's not a recon team to stay there for a couple days. There's guys to get in there, snag a prisoner, get one intel, and be out. So they're going to be on the ground less than an hour. That's it. Maybe an hour and a half, but really less than an hour, the key. So Billy's out there grabbing, and all of a sudden the NVA get their stuff together and they start charging. And I'm rolling in and I see all these NVA, and you know who they are. You see them running up the hill chasing this one guy. And all our guys had an orange panel on their top, on their hats. They didn't wear helmets on their hats, so we could see who they were. And so I just went in, rolled in, and shot a bunch of 17-pound head rockets in between, and then try to ease them into this onrushing group. Well, apparently some of the shrapnel ended up in the backside of Billy. So when the aircraft, the Jolly Green, come in, pick it up, and we get a team okay. We need a team okay, get a head count, make sure everybody's accounted for it, got a team okay, and then they tell you we got one WIA. So, everybody, who WIA, and then they don't come out on the air and say Billy, but they say the strap hanger. Well, we know it's Billy. So we get back to Quang Tri, they dump him off. He's at 18th Surge. He's laying on a concrete thing in triage. And they've cut all his stuff off his neck, and then they got this orange stuff they put on there, and they're starting to pick out shrapnel. I had landed, refueled, and we came back over in a Jeep with a couple other guys to see him, and I walked in. I said, "Damn, Billy, what happened?" And he looked up at me. He said, "When I get up here, I'm going to kill you." And I said, "What?" He says, "You shot me." I said, "I didn't shoot you." And he said, yeah, you did. I said, no, I didn't. He said, when you flew over me, my crew chief used to put under my aircraft, sneaky, in white letters. Sneaky white was my call sign. And he said, when you flew over me, he said, after you shot me, you flew over me and I could see it's your aircraft. And if I could have, I would have shot you. Yeah, I love Billy. Billy was a surrogate father to me in the service. He taught, my wife will tell you right now, a lot of times I'll say something. I'll say, Billy taught me this. Yeah, Billy taught me. And he's just an unbelievable guy. Did you read his book? Okay, when this is over, I'm going to show you to read his book. And there's another book where he's mentioned a lot by a gal wrote a book. And it's probably 2/3 of the book indirectly is about Billy. Yeah, Billy ended up with the CIA, retired out in the CIA. Have you ever heard the story about the guy that had Osama bin Laden in his gun sights and he was going to kill him and Clinton said, don't? True story. Billy Waugh. Billy Waugh knew who Osama bin Laden was before anybody else. He knew he was a problem. And he was in Khartoum. And he had his guns. He was on a overlook looking at him. And he was with the CIA. And Billy had one character flaw that I didn't. I'd have shot him and then, you know what? What are you going to do to me? Billy lived by the code. They didn't assassinate people unless he had permission. And 18 months later, 9/11, Billy went to his grave, pissed off over that. And a lot of people said Billy was vocal about I should have killed him, because a lot of what's happening in the world would not have happened without bin Laden. And it wasn't that bin Laden was brains, but there's two kinds of terrorism. There's three kinds really of terrorism in the world. There's state-sponsored, Iran, good example, state-sponsored. Okay, they sponsor Hamas and Hezbollah. And now they're sponsoring in Yemen, too. So they're sponsoring all these groups, okay? Then there is the lone wolf terrorism, single act. You can't, it's almost impossible to stop that. And then there's third kind, which Osama bin Laden was the pinnacle of that. He had billions of dollars at his beck and call. He was a billionaire. And if anybody came to him and said, hey, I need $1 million to do this, he said, sure. So he had tentacles, and people don't know this. They really don't. And a little research, you could probably find out I'm correct on this. But the terrorism that takes place in the Philippines, in the islands of the Philippines to this day, was bin Laden sponsored. He put up the money for it. His name wasn't mentioned because there was a group down there, but he funded them. One man funded all these organizations. And Billy Waugh, and if he could have taken him out, that would have been the end of bin Laden's structure, because most of his family was not in the terrorism business. It was just him. He, in essence, was a lone wolf in his family that had access to billions of dollars. Anyway, I don't want to get off the beaten path, but Billy was like a surrogate father to me. I was just a wonderful guy. Anyway, so I flew with them for about 15 months. And then when I had an operation called Lom-Som 719 took place. And this was the last big operation in Vietnam. And what it was basically was, when I say we, the armed forces were going to go all the way through Uncut into Laos. along the Ho Chi Minh Road. They were going to cut it. And it was a great idea. The problem was twofold. Congress had prevented Americans from going into Laos. We weren't supposed to be there. So we could not have Americans on the ground with the ARVNs. But we supplied the air power. So we had, I'll never forget this, we had 1,000 helicopters, picture that, going that way, going west at one time. Okay, and if you ever read, there's a book by Keith Nolan, who he's passed on, but he wasn't a vet, but he did his homework, and about Lam Sam 719. There's several good books about it. The Lam Sam, it was a disaster, and the reason is the ARVN dropped the ball. Not all the ARVN units, but a lot of them turned tail. Plus, the NVA knew we were coming, or they knew they were coming. They were ready for them. Anyway, when Lam Sam 719 happened, they shut off SOG, said no more. So the first day of Lam Sam 719, a CAV unit lost, I think, they lost, I forgot, Major Newman came down and saw me the next day and said, "Hey, Sneaky, you want to fly scouts again for me?" He said, "I lost 3 of them yesterday, and I need somebody." So I said, "Sure, under the condition that when I'm done with you, this operation, I come back flying Cobras, because I'll go back Special Forces." And he said, "Sure." Well, little did I know that was the end of Special Forces, totally, because it was the end of the war. Anyway, so I go and I fly scouts, Loaches. I'm back into flying Loaches, and this time into Laos, which is really wild. The NVA were all over the place shooting. I mean, it was just unreal. But it was, I know, it was exciting. I don't want to say it was enjoyable, but it was exciting. I mean, we got back. We lost a lot of guys. Lam Sam 719 was tough. After that, I stayed around flying for a CAV unit for about 5-6 months, and then I came back to the States at the end of the war. So I came back, went to Fort Bragg, took a flight physical and bombed it. I'm deaf in my left ear and couldn't pass flight physical. So I got out. And there were no jobs to be had. And about 3 months later, I got a call from a friend of mine and said, "Hey, I want to go back over to the Far East." And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, Air America's hiring." And he said, "I put your name in, they're going to call you." And so I went back with AA. And problem with AA, it's like a union thing. I was last out. I was last in, first out. So when they quit, so it ends up I have like 15 months with AA, because I was one of the last guys they hired, and I was one of the first guys they let go. So I did that. And then I came back to the States and really couldn't get a job. There were no aviation jobs, couldn't get a job. Worked for the railroad for a while. And got a call, said, "Hey, you want to go to South Africa?" And I said, "Sounds good." And so I went for the fellas. I went back and went over to South Africa, flew out of Joburg, South Africa, Johannesburg, flew for a year, and flew fixed wing. I was co-pilot on a DC-3, doing night parachute drops into Rhodesia, Zimbabwe now. But we were fighting the Marxists. We weren't, but zealous scouts were. And we were aviation support for them till the South Africans got their stuff in order. And it was really pretty interesting because it was wasn't just Americans, even though the fellows had hired us, we get there, we go under them. And, I flew with guys from Belgium, from the Netherlands, from England. I flew for, different, these guys they're out there for, Terry and the pirates type of guys. They've been flying. So I flew for them for a year. I liked it and got paid in Cougarans, gold Cougarans. It was pretty good. Living was real good. Came back to the States and just hated the States, hated the people. I mean, there was still the backlash of Vietnam veterans. Applied for a couple of jobs and they said, Vietnam, So I ended up with some oil companies. I worked for some oil companies, flying for them in Alaska and Grand Isle, Louisiana, which you never want to go to. They ever give the enema to the world, it's going to be in Grand Isle, Louisiana. You can't show that, but that's the truth. There's Grand Isle, horrible. But I flew for them, and I flew in Alaska. Flew a little bit in Nigeria, Lagos, which is the slum of the world at that time. Hades replaced it now, but it was horrible in Lagos. Then my wife put her foot down, justifiably, and so I went in and did some construction work for a while. Not much other work, just literally bummed around. And then a couple of years ago, about 3 years ago, well, my wife died in 2017. She had dementia and died. And my wife now, my wife and I've known my wife and her husband for almost 40 years. He was a great story with him. Chris was a submariner, subs for 20 years. And when Pearl Harbor happened, he was on his sub in Pearl Harbor and watched it. He was a young kid. He was like 3 years in the Navy when that happened. And he was 15 years older or more than Dale. Anyway, he passed away in 2010. Great guy, wonderful guy. Walk in a room, nobody could not like him. He was just a wonderful guy. Anyway, he passed away, and when my wife passed away, Dale and I got to talking, and so we're together now. And we decided, we lived in California, Sonoma, wine country, got overcrowded, overtaxed, and far to the left of common sense. So we decided to leave, and I had a job offer in Hilton Head, South Carolina, running a VA, not a VA, but a veterans camp. It was a really good job offer. She actually said I should have taken that job. But there were some things about it. I had other job. I have a job offer in Pensacola, Florida, with a military think tank that was really great, and the money was just obscene. The benefits were obscene, and I would have liked it because I like to scuba dive, and I'm probably past parachute now, but I enjoy. I would have liked it. I have tons of friends that live in Pensacola area, especially Marine friends. I have tons of them, but in my heart, I wanted to go to Texas, down in the southern part of Texas, buy a ranch, and not a huge ranch, but a ranch, maybe a couple, maybe a section, and raise cattle, and that's what I wanted to do. And then one of my old commanding officers from the Griffins lives here in town, Major William Dick, And then one of my co-pilots lives up the road in Kettle Falls by the name of John Garrison. Everybody calls him Krusty. I'm the one that gave him that name, Krusty. And the first time we met, he was old Special Forces and went to flight school because he didn't want to be on the ground in Special Forces. A very, very distinguished career pre-Vietnam. He worked, I've talked to people that knew him. He worked in Germany for 10 Special Forces for years, and his intelligence, and everybody I've talked to ever says he was the authority on the Stasi, which is the East German secret police, and he worked missions into East Germany and survived them. Anyway, he got orders to Nam, and he said, well, I think I'll go to flight school, and if I'm going to go, I'll go this way. So on his second tour, he was with the Griffins, and he was my co-pilot. The night he checked into the unit, I looked at him, and I was the oldest warrant officer in the unit. I was the old man. These are kids flying these missions. These are 19, 20-year-old kids that were flying. This guy's and I are in our 30s. So when he walked in, he actually tried to sit at my table, and I told him, get the hell out. The only people at my table were my dog. And I poured a plate and poured beer in it. When when Fred got drunk, he'd lay over, and I knew it was time. I got to go. Now, Fred. Anyway, so he and I had words and almost came to blows, actually. And I said, you're a crusty old bastard. And that name stuck, and everybody calls him Krusty. And like my call sign, Sneaky White. I had a guy get hold of me. Excuse me. I had a guy get a hold of me 10 years ago from a lab. He didn't get a hold of me directly. He went to a reunion. I have never been, and I won't go unless it's in Spokane. But I'm not going to make a trip anywhere to the Vietnam Helicopter Pilots Association. Most of them are CAV guys. I'm not a CAV guy. Even though I was with the CAV, I'm not a CAV guy. I don't wear the hat and all that crap. I was always working with Special Forces. Anyway, this guy shows up at a reunion, and he's going down the bar. He says, hey, anybody know where Sneaky is? I'm looking for Sneaky White from the DMZ. And one of my guys I flew with said, yeah, I know him. What do you want with him? And he said, I want to talk to him. I want to thank him. He saved my life. And so he said, well, let me check, because Sneaky's a loner. So he contacts me. He said, hey, I got this guy that named Vernac. He wants to. I said, yeah, tell him, contact me. And I said, what was the call sign? He said, I don't know. So I said, I don't remember the name. What unit was he with? Don't know. So anyway, he contacts me, and he said, look, I owe you saved my life. And I said, yeah, what'd you do? And he said, I flew loaches, little birds. And he said, I said, what was your call sign? And he said, Thunder 33. I said, I know you. I never met him, but I know you. And he says, I tell my kids every day that, I'm here because of this guy, Sneaky White. Anyway, he lives in Alaska, and he's retired now. And to this day, I haven't met him face to face. That's on my bucket list to do, is to go up and see him and meet him. And but I won't go. It won't be at a reunion like the pilots' reunion. I don't need to go to there. But yeah, it's small world. I mean, it's and I'll use another example of small world. I was doing a contract flight when I was in Texas, waiting to get on with the oil companies. Guy said, look, when you fly a Lockheed Lodestar, like, and this is plane like Sky King, the old TV show, little plane like that. So you want to fly it, and you fly it down to Puerto Rico, and then pick up some stuff and bring it back to Florida, and then take it to Page Aeromotive and have in Georgia and have them clean it out, and then bring it back here. I had to go pick up the aircraft. The aircraft was not in Texas, so I went and picked up the aircraft. The aircraft was from Virginia, flew down, did everything he wanted. So I unloaded the plane, and I'm on final to, I think it was Augusta, Georgia I was going into. Anyway, I was going into Page Aeromotive. So I called the tower, and he said, I'm in short final. So roger that. And so you give your number, your tail number, November 67Y or whatever the hell it was. So when I peel off the runway, I go to ground, and I say, this is November 67Y or whatever. And, I need to go to Page Aeromotive. And the guy said, gave me the direction. He said, did you fly helicopters in Vietnam? I said, yeah. And he says, you're sneaky white. And I thought, how the hell does this guy know this? I got to tell you, the flight I brought up from Puerto Rico may not have been totally legit. So I'm thinking, oh, geez, this is going to be bad. So he says, yeah, when you shut down, come on over to the tower. I can talk to you. I thought, oh, yeah, this is going to be real bad. I shut down. I go over the tower. I go up into the tower. They got to buzz you in. I get up in the shower tower, and this guy stands up, and he says, so you're sneaky white. He said, I was the tower operator at Quang Tri Airport, and you refueled there 2 or 3 times and rearmed there every day. I know your voice. And I thought, holy mackerel. He was an Air Force kid in a little box tower, because Quang Tri was, their tower was one quarter the size of this room. It was, and I thought, he says, what are you doing here? I said, I'm having a plane serviced at Page, and then I'm taking it to Houston. He said, what are you doing tonight? I said, I'm going to the motel and crashing. And he said, well, we'll pick you up at the motel and bring you out for dinner. And they gave me a nice dinner, a really nice guy. So next morning I take off. So when I'm at Page Aeromotive, they worked on the plane, and so I'm ready to take off. So I call the ground and tell them, just, November 67, why this is, I'm at Page Aeromotive for the active, for, taxi the active. And the tower operator, it wasn't him. Tower operator says, sneaky white, you're clear, 1, 2, 3. So I went out, he cleared me for takeoff, and when I was on the runway ready, I started rolling. He said, you're clear for takeoff. When I started rolling, as I climbed out, as I broke to the northwest, as I broke, bringing up the gear, I said, I called the tower, and I said, this is the sneaky white. I'll be QSY, which changed frequency. I'll be QSY to the west for the last time. Yes. It was, it's a small world that happened. I mean, just small. So, but anyway, so when we came up here, we bought acreage. We got 10 acres. And my wife and I both love the Washington, not so much the western part of the state, but we love this. In fact, we've had deep discussions of why didn't we go just across the border to Idaho, but we love where we are because we're right next to the river. We're feeding about 25 deer, 5 moose, probably 100 plus turkeys. My wife's got 4 raccoons she's feeding, 3 feral cats, and a zillion little birds. Hummingbirds haven't come back yet, but they will. But we love it up here, and it's very relaxing. I'm in my 80s now, and my wife's birthday was 2 days ago. She turned 86. So my health is pretty good, and I love it. And I do volunteer work for the National Veterans Foundation out of Los Angeles. And it gives me a chance to give back to people that are less fortunate than me. And I really enjoy that. Other than that, I belong to special operations. I belong to a zillion associations, but I'm really only active in Special Operations Association, and there's a thing called Papa Smoke, which is a Marine Corps thing, and myself and another guy years ago, probably now it's got to be close to 30 years ago, maybe longer, and we started an HMM 262 association, which is amazing because at the last 3 reunions, we've had kids that were with 262 in the Gulf War come in. And they're kids. And so that association that squadron's still working. Now it's VMM because they're doing the Osprey. They're no longer helicopters, but it's our squadron cutters. So they're still doing that. But other than that, I'm a VFW and American Legion. I'm not involved with them. And I just joined a group of pilots here locally and sit and tell war stories. But other than that, I wrote a book, a historical novel called The Laotian Highway Patrol. And I've got another one in the back of my mind that next winter I'm probably going to tackle. But this is spring, summer, and this is work time. And when you get my age and you retire, you then go to work. And, we got 3 acres of lawn, and which I'm converting to clover so I don't have to cut it. And the deer love it. And but other than that, that's my story in my life. I'm sticking to it. I have my Harley Davidson, which my wife, every time I get on it, she says, "Is your insurance paid?" And I tell her, it's not a regular Harley. It's 139 horsepower. It's not even near a regular Harley. But like I told her, I survived Vietnam. But motorcycle ain't going to do nothing to me. So, and you see my paintings when I'm pretty good. I tell everybody I cover their numbers. Those are not number paintings, but that's what I tell them. I never knew I had that talent. And I just one day, I said, I think I'm going to try this. And I haven't set up the easel here. We're just still settling into this. We've only had this house 2 years, and there's been a lot going on with this place. And you came in the mud room we built. Next month, I'm going to start building a 3rd bathroom, ADA, fully equipped. ADA because we're aging and we want to stay here for the rest of it. And then, of course, there's just a lot of work to do, but I love it up here. And thankful that I survived the war. And well, through one other thing, which is maybe this is I had an uncle in World War, and he was in World War II, and he was a B-17 pilot in Europe. And I forgot how many missions he flew, but it was a bunch. And he came back shattered several times. But anyway, he ended up bigwig with Reynolds International Metals, traveled all over the world with him. Lived in Bermuda, had a house in Bermuda, a horse ranch in Virginia, had another house in Perth, Australia. Guy, he'd done very well. Got out, went to college in Penn State and got his MBA and really did well. Anyway, one day I was home and went up to Connecticut. I was sitting on the back patio, which was a pretty large patio, probably room for 50 chairs. And we had a big, huge place. And we had 5 acres of lawn. So just show you. So we're sitting out there, and Uncle Royce was his name. So Uncle Royce was sitting there, and he said, I was flying in Vietnam, and I said, not as bad as you. You flew into Germany. I don't know how many times, but so he said, yeah, and he commented about his boots. He looked at my boots and he said, boy, those are nice looking boots. Where'd you have them done? And I said, well, you're not going to believe this, but I have because I have my feet are messed up. I said, my boots custom made for me in Hong Kong by a guy named Leakey. And he says, yeah, the guy takes a mold of your foot and does that. And I said, yeah, how do you know that? He said, they're leaky. He said, they're leaky. And then I'm thinking, what a small world. Here's my uncle from East Texas who travels the world. But he's got the same bootmaker as I got, which is purely luck. Well, anyway, I wrote my book, and my dad sent it to my uncle. Copy. I didn't send it to him. He sent it to my uncle, and I got a letter from my uncle. It really was a hell of a letter. And he said, after reading your book, he said, what I went through was peanuts. He said, you did it for years. And he said, you end up with 3,000 hours of doing it. He said, I can't comprehend that. And he said, how much he respected what I did. And I was thinking, here's, World War II, I cannot envision flying. Well, I do because I was at Lam Sam 719 with all those helicopters going, and we were taking airbursts, and when a plane get hit, the helicopter would go down. All you'd hear is like Chalk 6 hit, and then the Chalk lead would say, close it up. And I've thought of this multiple times. This is what happened in World War II. When they would fly to Germany, plane go down, they just say, close it up, get tight. Now they, for a different reason, because the way they protected themselves, the way the guns were, they had a position where their fields of fire overlapped. Okay, and helicopters with 260s, that then, of course, Cobras are all over, but we didn't have to worry about MiGs. Well, once in a while you hear MiG, they come on guard, MiGs, MiG. And one of my best buddies, Rick Freeman, Rick Freeman dreamed, he said, I want to hear a MiG because I want to go up and fire a set of Fouchette nails into their. I can't shoot it down, but if I could get it nails into the intake, I'll blow the engine, and he'll have to punch out, and I'll be the first helicopter to shoot down a jet. And we still, to this day, talk about it. And I'm going to see him in August. He lives in Denton, Texas, and we're going to go to. I'm going to go to Oklahoma to see Jimbo, and he's going to come on up there, and we're going to have a mini reunion of the Griffins. So anyway, that's it. Yeah. Anything else?
I had a quick question. So just to review, you got the DFC for that action when you plugged the oil hose.
The fuel line.
Fuel line. Okay.
Yeah.
That was the DFC. What was the Silver Star action?
Oh, that was. How do you know about the Silver Star?
I saw your Silver Star in the thing in the case.
Oh yeah. Well, I was flying a Loach, and recon. I was working. A recon team was in trouble, and we were working the Cobras, and I was flying a Loach, and after the Cobras ran out of ammo, and they were making dry passes, and the recon team had two critically. And so what I did was I said, you know what, screw it, let's go, let's shoot all your ammo in the plane. My door's gonna just shoot the shit out, just rack it. We're going in, and then just literally throw these two kids in the plane. Anyway, we took, I don't know, a dozen hits coming out, and invariably, the Loach is a great aircraft that can take a lot of hits, and if you crash it, you roll it in the ball and theoretically walk out. Anyway, anytime you take hits and it blows out the window, you figure that I can touch the front screen right there. So when you're taking hits that close, anyway, the CNC, who couldn't get in, it was a very tight spot. They were going to have to actually, if they could get a medevac Huey in there, they were going to have to take them out on a hoist. And now, figure that's 5-7 minutes, and there's two. Guy would have never made it. I mean, the gunfire was that radical. So, I went in there, and CNC told me, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm going to get him." And he said, "No, wave off," and don't tell me to wave off. So I went in and got him, and so I got a medal, big deal, and a cup of coffee. I don't drink coffee; I'm a tea drinker. Oh, I mean, that's my English raising. I don't drink coffee, but I got. I was fortunate to get some medals, but the only one I'll always have said that's only 2 medals mean a damn thing to me. And that's my Marine Corps good conduct for undetected crime. Because I screwed up enough, but they never nailed me. I even had an office hours. Technically, I beat it. And I had to cover this thing up, but I didn't cover it all the way. I didn't have it bright yellow. I had it like that tan bag there. Over there, I tanned it down. And then, but getting the DFC, and to this day, in fact, you talk about it, when I got the DFC that day, our unit, not only our unit, but the MAG, Marine Aircraft Group, changed. When I go in the club, they ring the bell, 1 DFC. It's a thing when you arrive on ship, if you're a flag, or your commanding officer of a big unit. So when you land, they'll ring the bell throughout the ship on a carrier and say, commanding officer HMM 262 landing, Well, the guys, the enlisted guys, whenever I go in, they'd say, ding, 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 one DFC arriving. And as, of course, I'm proud of, but if you talk to the guys I was with, that changed their perspective. That was an officer's medal for the Marine Corps. That was an officer pilot medal. All of a sudden, they gave it to a sergeant. And I've had multiple crew chiefs say, I know now I'm capable of getting it. And when you change things, that's huge. It's huge. When you make a change in anything, no matter what you're doing, if you can change, to the positive now, but if you can make a change, that's positive. And to this day, and I'm going to meet them here in end of July, 1st of August, a bunch of these, well, not many are left now, but I'll meet probably 25, 30 of these guys that I was with, not even that many, 20 anyhow. And they all say, you get that DFC, even though they never got one, they said, we now know that an enlisted guy can get it. It was, it's like the old days, the only people that got Legion of Merits were colonels and above. Now, they're giving them to enlisted people, warrant officers that have done 25, 30 years of distinguished service. On their retirement, they give them the Legion of Merit. And I'm not a big, I know I have a shadow box, and I didn't make that. It was given to me by the Marine Corps, by the way. Anyway, if you look at the awards and decorations, and I always do, when I look and see officers especially, I look and I see 5, 6 ribbons, and they're all for doing their job. Not into that. I have a theory. I have 3 Purple Hearts. I have a theory on it. I believe the only ribbon an officer should get is the Purple Heart or the Medal of Honor. And that has its own level to get, but all the rest are all crap. And all this thing, the Distinguished Service Medal, Meritorious Service, they hand them out like butter. Unfortunately, and I was in the Army, you got a Bronze Star for doing a year in Vietnam without getting court-martialed. That's the truth, or without getting Article 15 or court-martial. That's a Bronze Star. To me, a Bronze Star should only be awarded if it has a V on it for valor. They have cheapened the award. Now, the Army, I don't know if they still do that, but I look now and I look at the awards and I think, and I'm not even saying the Army started it. I think really the Air Force started it, because in the Air Force, I've actually looked. You get a ribbon for finishing basic. You get a ribbon, of course, for shooting, which they don't even shoot like Marines do. They shoot, they don't shoot 500 yards and all this. And then they get if the honor graduate gets a ribbon. Well, you can actually be in the Air Force and have like 15 ribbons and never been overseas. And I know this for a fact because I have a friend of mine who's a retired Air Force captain. He was enlisted for 10 years, then went to OCS. His job was electronics. His 20 years, 21 years. Only time overseas. The only time was he spent 2 years in Belgium, Germany with SHAPE headquarters. His job is electronics. He has 15 awards, and he's never heard of, he's a friend of mine. He never heard a shot fired in anger. Never was put in a position to be. And to me, the whole mental thing is just whacked out of shape. It used to be, and I've had 4 friends. I'm talking buds, and only one of them's still left alive. That had the medal. I have a friend of mine with the Navy Cross who's now deceased, who won his Navy Cross in my aircraft. Okay, on Hill 881, when he ran out there 3 different times. We landed on a hill. He ran out 3 different times, picked up wounded, and carried him back in a motor attack, which is insane. I wasn't in the aircraft. It was my aircraft. I wasn't in it. He was flying it that day. And Gui Gomez, another sad story, came back to the States. He's a Mexican-American. He can't get a freaking job. He's from California. Anyway, but I have 4 friends of mine that have received the medal, and they deserved it. What they did was just unreal. And Mike Lawson, dead, Marine. Mike Lawson, helicopter crew chief, and HMM 263. They land in a minefield. They know it's a minefield. The pilot said, we're going to land, and these guys were trapped in a minefield, and they're taking fire. And he said they'll walk to the aircraft. Now, you got to understand, I've brought Mike home drunk more times than I brought him home sober. Mike was from southern Louisiana, big Cajun guy, big guy. And like to fight. Mike and I, Mike's was a great guy. Anyway, Mike said disconnected, got out of the aircraft, walked 6 times into a minefield to pick up wounded Marines, threw them over his shoulder and walked. This is in a rice paddy, and told the others to follow my footsteps, brought him back to the aircraft. Now here's the kicker. A guy named Nixon gives him the medal. Nixon says he's putting the medal around, says, it's not in a citation, but I heard you climbed under the aircraft to get a dead Marine's body. Now, Mike Lawson's, you got to be careful with Mike. He'll say what he thinks. He's talking to the President of the United States. All the Marines knew that Mike's was this way. Mike tells Nixon, he said, you wouldn't understand this because you were in the goddamn Navy, but Marines don't leave their dead behind. This is why the guy's putting this around this Mike Lawson. Now, Mike didn't mean to disrespect the president, but he said, you're in the Navy, you don't know what we don't do this. This is... So I was fortunate to be around, Dave Altoff, 3 Silver Stars in 3 weeks. I was fortunate enough to be around guys, Billy Sergeant Major Wall, a living, not now, but a legend beyond. The last was in Roger Rank, but I'm I got a mental block on his name now. But I've been around guys that were that did unbelievable acts of valor that were never recorded. Jim Mitski, I'm going to see him here. Jim Mitski holds a footnote in Army helicopter history. His aircraft, his Cobra, 3 different times landed to pick up wingmen, put them on the ammo bay doors and bring them out. And twice, Jim Mitski was the pilot. He's the only helicopter. Now, a helicopter pilot just received the Medal of Honor for picking up 4 recon men in his Cobra. Jim Mitski once landed this is in Laos. Never happened. I know this because I watched this. I was circling him. We're coming back, and a team is MIA. Totally teamed. No word from them. And they've been like this for about a week. We're coming back, and there's a field out in the middle of Laos. And there's a guy waving this orange panel. We swing around. It's a Montagnard, but it could be an MVA, could be a trap. Mitski said, let's find out. He went and landed. Now, this Montagnard didn't know how to open the ammo bay doors. So Mitski's co-pilot, I think it was Gene Mock, he opens the front window and says, here, and the kid climbs in, and Mock has to hold him for 25 minutes. All he had on was his underwear. That's all he had left. He was holding him like this over the controls while Mitski flew back. When he got back, they wanted to court-martial him. Why'd you land a Cobra? But like Mitski said, you can't do shit to me. Never happened. Everybody knew it did. Jim Mitski, quite a guy. He landed twice, picked up a wingman. Gene Mock, who lives over in Olympia. He got shot down in Ashaw Valley. There's a great picture of him sitting on the ammo bay doors, coming back in. Yeah, I made it back. But these acts of, quote, we use the word valor, they don't get recorded or they get lost in the shuffle or whatever. And that happens. That happens. But then you turn around and you see a guy that pushed paper. That's all he did, push paper. And he's got, Defense Meritorious Service or Meritorious Service. You did your damn job. Give it a break. I mean, and I look at officers especially, the only 2 awards we should get. That's it. And, we do. And I look at them. I know the ribbons, so I can look and tell you I know where you've been. But, some of it's ridiculous. It really is. And, you graduate boot camp now in the Army, you get a ribbon. And you get, what? You're in the Army uniform. Of course you graduated, damn it. What the hell? It's... times have changed. It's gotten that way with the little leagues, and no one, you get a participation ribbon. There's no winners and losers. Well, life is winning and losing. You're going to have good days, you're going to have bad days. I've had plenty of bad days, but I've had some great days. It's going to balance out. So you've had enough from me.
Yeah. Well, can I get just one more? If you had to kind of summarize briefly what your Vietnam experience means to you, is there any way you can do that in a brief little?
Vietnam experience was the best and the worst times of my life. I made friends that are my friends today. I don't have too many civilian friends. I'm trying to think, I probably don't have any. I'm a loner. But not when I'm around my friends. One of my best friends is a guy named Sweet Griffin, Rick Freeman. Rick and I can sit in a room and not say 100 words and have the greatest discussion in the world for 3 hours. That's just the way it is. It was a defining moment in my life where I feel I accomplished something good. We may have lost the war. We didn't lose the war. the politicians lost the war. Vietnam, the lesson learned was politicians need to stay out of the war business. And more importantly, and this is what I'm proud of being a Vietnam veteran, is that we are not allowing our country, i.e. politicians, but our country now to mistreat the veterans that have served in subsequent battles. If anything, we have become a strong voice for that. It's not over. It's not done 100. It's not 100% fixed, and it's getting worse now with throwing veterans out of housing and putting in illegals. But the fact of the matter is that I've learned that this small group of 7.5%, 7.6% of Americans that are veterans, we're special people. We'll never get the full credit, but no problem. We don't need it. We know it amongst ourselves. That's it.
Excellent. Perfect. That was a great way to wrap it up. Thank you. Can I snap a few pictures of you too before I head out completely?
Sure.